It would be James and his wife, Mandy's first home they bought. They had both saved up enough money to finally purchase the house. They considered it their dream house. It was spacious and had a back garden for their future kids. But they would soon discover that their dream house was the stuff nightmares are made of. James and Mandy Fisher were married for 5 years when they finally bought their dream home. They decided to settle in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania with their dog, Scout. It was moving day and James and Mandy had packed up their belongings from the apartment they had rented. They were overjoyed to be leaving. They only had a few boxes, but they vowed to fill their new house with all the things they wanted and loved to make it a home they could cherish. They couldn't believe how much space they had. It was 2 floors, and on the second floor were all the bedrooms. There was a floor hatch in the kitchen. She hadn't noticed it before when the realtor took them on a tour of the house, but then she saw that it was bolted shut with a lock. She showed James, and they made a plan to try and open it to see what was beneath the kitchen floor. Mandy saw that there was something behind an antique cupboard that was left behind by the previous owner. It clearly made Scout uncomfortable, and he started growling. The realtor said the house belonged to an old lady who had no children to pass the house on to. The antique cupboard wasn't bad looking, but Mandy decided that it needed a fresh coat of varnish. She moved the cupboard slightly and then made a strange discovery. There was a locked door behind the cupboard. Why was the cupboard pushed against this door? Over the next few weeks, Mandy tried looking for the key to the mysterious door in the kitchen. She even looked in the drawers of the antique cupboard, but found nothing. Mandy and James were settling in after a hard day's work of moving and rearranging their furniture. It was snowing outside, and Mandy couldn't wait to jump into bed. James had switched on the heating system to warm up their room for the night. They settled in, and Mandy took out her book to read a few chapters. It was then that they both sat up as a smell wafted into their bedroom. They decided to relocate to one of the other bedrooms. But Scout just stood by the door, not wanting to come in. Just as Mandy climbed into bed and opened her book, the smell returned. It was then that they realized that something was horribly wrong. The next day, James knew he had a big task ahead of him. It seemed like the smell was coming every time he switched on the heating system. James needed to test the heating system throughout the entire house. It seemed like the whole house had a problem with the smell. He felt like he wanted to tear down everything to see what was causing it. It was time to check all the vents. All the rooms had it, so it was just a matter of unscrewing them all and checking what was inside. He saw nothing out of the ordinary. He then went through all the other rooms but noticed the living room didn't have one. Where was the smell coming from? James realized that it could be something that he wasn't able to do on his own. This job needed the help of a professional. Just as James was closing the last vent in the home office, he saw something gleaming inside. It was a key. James showed Mandy the key. It was then that she realized which door the key belonged to. It was the door behind the antique cupboard in the kitchen. Finally, they were able to open it and see what was inside. Something terrifying awaited them. They heard Scout barking incessantly in the living room. It was dark in the basement, and they couldn't find a light switch, so they took a flashlight to light their way. They went down, spurred on by curiosity. They suspect that the smell could have been coming from the basement. James tripped over something. His flashlight was on the dirty floor and pointed further into the room. They saw wine barrels, antique furniture, wooden chests, and lots of framed pictures. All of the chests were empty, and Mandy wondered what the old lady had kept inside them. When they hadn't found anything of interest down in the basement, Mandy remembered the other mystery she had found in their kitchen, the floor hatch. That's when James saw the reflection of metal in the room. He walked over and found something he could substitute as a key. They opened the lock and lifted the heavy hatch. There were strange jars which looked like they had preserved foods inside. They also found a box. The box contained old recipes. Scout had started growling again, and they couldn't understand his behavior. There was something else that didn't look that remarkable until James decided to pick it up. There was also a rolled-up parchment, and when James unrolled it, he was amazed to find that he was looking at the original blueprints of the house. It was dated 1887. They packed everything back in the box and lifted it out of the hatch. They decided to look at it after dinner. Just as she was about to set the table for dinner, they heard a piercing howl coming from Scout. They had never heard him do that before. Mandy started feeling a creeping uneasiness wash over her. Just as she turned to leave the kitchen, it happened again. The rotten smell returned. Mandy asked Jameis if he had turned on the heating system, but he didn't. Their minds went to classic horror movies where demonic activities caused an unpleasant odor. But this was real life. James and Mandy both felt nervous in their own house. They evacuated the kitchen and ate dinner in the dining room, where the smell was the weakest. Mandy reassured her husband that they would worry about it in the morning. For now, they finished dinner and went to bed. The morning broke and the two woke up, but neither felt like they had gotten quality sleep. When James saw the distressing look on his wife's face, he decided to try and cheer her up the best way he knew how. They decided to relax in the living room. James lit the fireplace and it warmed the whole room up. Then they brought out the box they found in the floor hatch. They looked at the old blueprints and compared them with the one the realtor gave to them. There were noticeable differences, and then Scout started barking uncontrollably again. Scout was barking at the same corner of the living room. James decided to have a look at what he was barking at. He lifted the carpet, and there it was, another vent. But this was very strange because this vent was not on the new blueprint, but it was on the old one. James and Mandy were getting worried. The next morning, James called in professionals immediately. They needed to check if there wasn't anything in the vent, as he couldn't open it. When they eventually managed to open it, they made a gruesome discovery that made their blood run cold. They found various jars with putrid liquids in them, and most disturbingly, several animal carcasses and bones. James and Mandy were uneasy. This is what Scout was barking at, and the jars were causing the smell. The maintenance man then told them it wasn't as unusual as they thought. He told them that he and his team found these all the time in the old Victorian houses. It was Pennsylvania's tradition of ritual healing known as powwow. He said they used animal carcasses to combine elements of religion and belief with health and healing. It seems the old lady who lived here needed healing, but James and Mandy decided that it was best to remove the jars and carcasses so that the smell could disappear and they can continue to live normal lives so that Scout can be at ease.